This is a quick little overview of the Nikon 1 V2. Before this there was a Nikon 1 V1, which at the time I think was the first camera that had phase detect autofocus built into the sensor. Normally mirrorless cameras would have had only contrast detection autofocus, which was a little less reliable in some situations and not as quick. But I think Nikon was the first with that on the Nikon 1 V1. And this is the 14 megapixel sensor. The V1 had a 10 megapixel sensor. They changed some things obviously with the V2, like having the mode dial here. On the V1 there was no PSAM mode dial to go into manual, aperture, shutter priority, or programmed auto. Really they had a mode dial, but really all it was there was like the automatic, there was a couple of those goofy best photo selector, there was a motion snapshot, I think is what they called it on there. But there was, the PSAM was missing, and of course a lot of people were complaining about that. You had to go into the menu to change to get into one of those modes. They also put a feature button on here. The V1 didn't have a feature button, and this little dial here I think is new compared to the V1. And it basically, it rotates, but it also, you can click in on it to select things. So you can power it on by turning the lens. It has a collapsible lens, so when you collapse the lens it turns off, and when you open it up it turns on. And so basically, if you are on the feature selection there, if you click that, and then it turns into a selector where you can click it once to pick the setting you want, and rotate it to make the change, and click it again to save it. You've probably seen videos of this already, so I'm not going to go over the camera too much. But basically, it is an interchangeable lens camera. It's got the 1-inch image sensor in there, and the kit lenses that Microsoft, but talking about Microsoft, Nikon has for these is actually really good. The 10 to 30, which is this one, it's like a 27 to 81 millimeter equivalent. It's a 2.7 times crop factor with this camera, so the 10 millimeter lens actually equates to 27 millimeter on a full frame camera, like full frame 35 millimeter. They added the grip on here. It's actually really well built. I believe all of it is magnesium. It's very solid camera. The display on the back's nice, and the built-in viewfinder is actually really nice too. I find that it's very accurate as far as being able to tell what the exposure is going to be before you take a picture. And this one also has a built-in flash. It's small and not really too useful, but if you really need it for a little bit of fill flash, that's fine. As I was saying about the lenses are nice and sharp. They're only about $250. I think this one and the 30 millimeter to 110 millimeters is about $250 also, and they're very well stabilized. The vibration reduction on those is very well, or if you want to call it image stabilization. There's a mic input, HDMI output, and the USB port here on the side. And as far as the battery life goes, the battery life's, it's very respectable, and I've never really had a problem using it all day with and running the battery down. And this strap, by the way, is actually not the strap that comes with it. This is the Domke gripper, Domke or Domke, I'm not sure how you pronounce that exactly. But on the back of it, it's got this kind of like rubberized area on the two strips, and it's actually really grippy. And the rest of it is this is just regular cloth. It's not like some kind of synthetic material. But as far as let me show you the size of the camera. Actually, this is a little Fuji F30, a little point and shoot camera, which can kind of like fit in the palm of your hand, so you can see how small that is. So the camera is actually pretty small, the V2, and as far as thickness, it's actually probably a little bit thinner, you know, without the grip than the old Fuji F30. As far as the performance goes, obviously you may have heard this already if you've looked at other reviews, but the focus speed is very fast. You know, I find that the matrix metering on this, you know, which is basically it looks at the whole scene rather than just, you know, like spot metering is just a single point on the scene. But the matrix metering is very, very accurate from what I've seen. And it was the same thing with the V1, the Nikon V1. It was very accurate. You know, overall, the only thing, honestly, that I think is the flaw with this camera, and it's just, you know, it's one of those it is what it is situations. It's only a 1-inch image sensor, so, you know, image quality gets better over time naturally, but high ISO image quality is not going to come anywhere close to like a top-of-the-line micro four thirds camera, like a Olympus EM1 or EM5, and you know, this is supposed to be the top-of-the-line Nikon 1 model, the V2, at this point, which it's November 2013 right now. And, you know, even at the base ISO, there's a little bit of graininess in the picture. It's, you know, you would never notice it unless you zoomed in on it. But once you zoom in on it, you kind of get slightly disappointed because you wouldn't think that there'd be any noise at all at the base image or the base ISO, but there is a little bit of noise there. It's not really noise, I would say. It's just kind of a mild grain, and again, in normal prints you would never know the difference, and even like ISO 1600 you'd probably never really know the difference if you were shooting this and you know, printing out the pictures, you know, up to maybe 8.5 by 11, it would just look like a normal photo. Nobody would really notice it. It wouldn't stand out, I think, to anybody. You know, the battery goes in here obviously, and the memory card goes right next to that. This battery door here it's kind of a, if you ask me, it's kind of a cheap plastic. You know, I don't know, just the only part on the camera that seems a little bit cheap is that that battery door. Yeah, well, maybe the flash is a little flimsy too, but you know, again, I never really use the flash. Video, actually, the one thing is really nice about this camera, since the metering is very well and the image stabilization is very well, it actually makes a really good video camera. I'm not a very big video shooter myself, but you know, I've played around with it a little bit, and not even trying to do something, you know, all professional looking. You know, it does turn out really well, and you can get away with pretty much no editing if you want to set the camera up right before you start shooting, so you don't have to do any anything with the colors or white balance or anything like that in post-processing, which, you know, I'm pretty terrible at video as it is. So I try to avoid post-processing video if I can, and really the only thing I have right now that I would use for that is Adobe Lightroom, and you can make some minor changes in there, and that's really all I do. Probably with this video here that I'm recording here on the Nikon D600, that's this camera that's doing the recording. And so I've got the D600 with the 24 to 85 millimeter Nikon lens on there, and that's what's doing the recording. So anyway, that's pretty much what it is. You know, I found that I'll pick it up now and then. I have right now the Nikon D600, Fuji X100S, and the Nikon 1V2. You know, I use the D600 in the X100S most often, but this weekend I found myself using this just because sometimes it's fun to use. You know, it's very light, and you know, it's very fast, and you know, with good light, you know, it's a fall day right now. Most of the leaves are gone, but there are some leaves still hanging onto the trees, and you know, get the sunlight coming through the leaves, you know, to get those nice backlit foliage shots, and this does really well with that. So I'll put a link to my gallery for the Nikon 1V2 in the description of this video down below, and you'll see all the, you know, a whole bunch of pictures that I've taken with this. And you know, will I end up, you know, using it very much? Probably not too much. you know, it's one of those things that if I could do it over again, I probably wouldn't have bought it. I had the V1 before this, and for some reason I was, you know, a lot more keen on that camera. That, you don't know, it was just maybe it's just the shape and look of the camera versus this one. This one just, I don't know, there's really not much to talk about as far as how it looks. It's really not that nice of a camera as far as the looks go. You know, most people looking at it would just think it's kind of one of those super telephoto point and shoot models because of the, you know, the big grip and kind of a bigger lens on the front. But you know, nowadays you've got all the micro four thirds cameras like the new Olympus EM1. You've got the Panasonic GX7, I believe it is, and the older Olympus EM5, and those are very, very good cameras, and they're really about the same size as this. They're not very much bigger in most cases. They might be even about the same size, and of course those have a bigger sensor, and they're going to give you a lot better image quality, especially at higher ISO, and there's a whole bunch of great lenses for those. So I'm not trying to put down the, you know, the Nikon 1 series too much, but you know, when Nikon introduced it, you know, there was a big productional, you know, Nikon really did a lot of marketing around it, and I don't know, you've got so many small mirrorless cameras these days, it just seems like you know, this Nikon 1 is kind of losing its way, you know, getting lost in the crowd, and I'm not really sure where Nikon's going with it. They just released the not long ago a waterproof version of this, you know, to go underwater. So I don't know, maybe they're going to keep going on with it. Honestly, if it had a much better sensor for overall image quality, high ISO and otherwise, you know, and more lenses available for it, you know, that's really the only thing I could see that's honestly wrong with it. You know, if it just needs a better sensor. But as it is, you know, it is still a very good camera. And I know there's a lot of people that swear by it. You know, you look at some of the discussion forums, and there's a lot of people that you know, are very, very happy with it. And so I don't know, I guess it's kind of like up to the individual, but for me, since I tend to, you know, go for the highest image quality possible, you know, after, you know, maybe sometime next year, I just may end up switching it out with micro four thirds or something like that. So anyway, I didn't talk about the features or, you know, the menus too much, but you know, I'm sure you've already seen videos about that because it's way late when I'm doing this. I just got bored and thought I'd do it. So there it is, the Nikon 1 V2, and again, don't forget to look down below and you'll see a whole bunch of pictures that I've shot with this. Thanks for watching.